Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new winning edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce, joined by the one, the only, the Juice Man himself. It was what a win indeed, as our friend Jack R in the comments says here today. But before we get into the game, sir, Mr. Juice, how are you, my friend, on this beautiful Sunday evening in the Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana area?
Yeah, it's always a good weekend when you take 2 out of 3 from the shitbirds. Big fan of a lot of the stuff that happened this weekend. And what a great game today, right? Somewhat comeback fashion. I think that a lot of today should be put in a highlight reel and then sent to all the division leaders in need of extra guys because the trade deadline is coming up. And a lot of the guys that are probably going to be available showed some great things today that could potentially raise their value. So with that said, 2 out of 3 still counts. We'll remember it. But yeah, I'm feeling good. Raced back to do the show with you after 18 holes and got to watch a lot of the end of the ball game. Didn't watch as much as the beginning, but that's kind of where all this got mixed up, and I'll let you take that from here.
Yeah, man. I mean, what a game today. Obviously, we also did not come to the listeners yesterday, Saturday. Everybody's usually got things going on. Typically, our Saturday shows, just admittedly, always don't typically do that well from a listening standpoint. So that's why we don't usually do them. But nonetheless, the Cubs did fall on Saturday 5-3. Great comeback effort. Nonetheless, Rafael Ortega with the 2-run home run tied it in the 8th. But the Cubs proceeded to then give up 2 in the bottom of the 8th to lose that one. So the Cardinals' lone win coming in again. Mikolas pitched really well. And then, Cubs came back and then the Cubs lost. But we are here, though, Juice, as you mentioned, because of a series victory. Also, I'd like to make note that Rafael Ortega might have been the best dark horse fly the W pick that I've ever had for a series because that's a good fucking awesome this series. He did it again today. 2 more RBIs today, like you said, Juice. Guys that are probably going to be available at the deadline. Unfortunately, we have to do it, but you got to throw Wilson Contreras into that mix. He had 2 hits, 3 ribbies today. Certainly a good offensive day for him. Patrick Wisdom had a hit today as well. But guys that probably aren't going to be traded, Juice, Nico Horner, Yan Gomes, and Alfonso Rivas, all with 2 hits today. Things that you absolutely love to see, especially from some of these young guys. Not a great day for Ian Happ at the plate, 0 for 5 ultimately for him. But I mean, dude, when the bottom lineup's hitting like that, Nico's just a hitting machine right now, and then you don't get the greatest pitching today from Mills, but then Schwarmer comes in, shuts it down. And then to your point, Juice, guys potentially available at the deadline, at least 3 of these 4 names probably will be Martin, Wick, Gibbons, and Robertson ultimately get the job done for the Cubbies. 95 high heat from Robertson gets the job done to K. Arenado to end the game. Felt very poetic. It was very lovely to watch. But Juice, I mean, again, like you said, this is the type of series, especially in a season where it's a rebuild and it's a lot of bad. It's fucking cool and tough to go into their building and take 2 of 3 on a beautiful weekend in June from the Cardinals. I mean, there is absolutely no better feeling that you can have. And on top of it, Juice, they get to ride this high into an off day before coming back home for 6 games next week against the Reds and then the Red Sox at Wrigley Field, man. I mean, this is the exact type of momentum that you want as a team. Not only just heading into an off day, but I think just heading kind of into we're starting to approach the dog days of summer, right? Like July is where that starts to creep in. You got the All-Star break coming up, so guys like to lose focus over the next couple weeks. It's getting to that time. So today's series victory, ultimately, obviously with today's W6-5, was an absolute key for this Cubs team, Juice.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier on in your little soliloquy over there, as I like to call him, Nico Horner. I mean, Nico Horner is like 12 for 26 on the road trip, batted like 480. It's fantastic. He's a growth piece. It's fun to sit and watch these games when you see that production out of a guy that you figure for the future, right? He's gonna end up being a part of this team, no matter how important that ends up being. is left to be determined. But with that said, I've fully flipped my focus, I think, as of you, to, like you said, those three names in the bullpen. Givens has been really solid over the course of this last, 12 outings. I think he's only given up 6 runs over the last 12, opposed to, I think in the beginning of the season, he'd given up 10 runs just to start, and looked really shaky. Now he looks like a piece that, if somebody is like a fringe team, and I think that that's exactly what this new format has kind of done. There's a lot of guys and there's a lot of teams out there that I think that are going to, I call it fake buy. Like they go out there and they give up a player to be named later, or cash considerations are 2 favorite guys that are coming back in a trade, or, your low A, maybe hasn't panned out, long shot, or maybe a guy who is a former high prospect that has just been stuck at the minor league levels down there without any – that the Cubs think that they can, throw in the pitch lab or get in their system and change. I think that guys like that are what you'd expect for a return like Givens. I think Robertson may warrant a little bit more coming back, considering how he's pitched this year. But I too, like you said, I think that a lot of these names that we've talked about, Rowan Wick, they're going to listen. They're going to listen about guys, because there is a lot of pitching talent at the AAA level, at the AA level, even, that high A here in South Bend. That's interesting to sit and think, you should definitely look at your options. But I do think that this is the type of series that you roll on a highlight reel to anybody who's working to get into their division race or trying to plug some holes that have already kind of cemented their, status at the top of the division. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, like for us, Robertson's very important, right? For a team that is in the playoffs, you're looking at maybe a 6th or a 7th inning guy that's probably third out of the bullpen, right? But that's a damn good piece for a team like the Yankees, or a team like the Rays, that maybe you're not giving up too much in terms of prospect capital, but you're able to get a guy that can trust in an array of innings. And I think that he's kind of showed that in his Cubs tenure. But I know that we've talked, in depth about the Wilson Contreras extension. Should he be traded? Should he not be traded? I truly do think that the Cubs have just made this choice. And I think you're hearing it through tongue in cheek from the great Kyle Hendricks start we got. What was that, Friday night? Yeah. He was so appreciative and was able to, throw tons of respect and dap towards, Gomes as his catcher. And I think we've just gotten to the point where maybe, and I don't know if we've talked about this in terms of Wilson Contreras, but maybe the Cubs' new front office and the way that they're building this new team, maybe they don't value hitting it from the catcher's spot as much as they value a pitch framer, somebody who's better defensively, because that's been, and mind you, Wilson Contreras has been a lot better as a pitch framer, but he's not that elite type guy that buys you strikes all the time, right? Like, he's gotten a lot better at that as we've watched his Cubs career. But maybe the change in the front office, change in philosophy, I do think that they've tried probably for a long time to extend Willie. I do. I think they've maybe at least made an offer or two. Yeah. But if the idea inside of the front office has changed on how to construct a baseball team and he doesn't fit, we have to respect that, right? I mean, we have to look at it as if he's going to be traded and you're going to bring back a catcher prospect that they've done work on, or maybe they believe that they can go out and get somebody in the offseason that maybe buys you more strikes for a younger pitching staff in the future, because that's exactly what we're going to be dealing with in the future here. And maybe, just maybe, Wilson Contreras is just going to be that one-off, right? The guy that unfortunately we wanted to keep but couldn't, because the strategies for the front office changed. And I would hate to see it. trust me, I love Wilson Contreras. I love the way he plays. And I've said on this show, I think he's very important for development and for like the faith of the fan base. So it's a double-edged sword. I've fully kind of looked at it both ways. And I've just come to the conclusion that I'm not building this team. So you have to just trust the process from Jed and from, the front office that if they truly are moving their schemes and the way that they're going to build a team, and they don't believe that that's, the future of having him as your backstop, then, hey, tip your cap and thank you for your service. And I'll trust the rebuild, but I'm opening up myself up to flack at the end of it if they can't find somebody who's serviceable for that.
Yeah.
With that said, it was great for this weekend to have some great moments for, like I said, some trade value guys. And in the process, kick the shit out of the Cardinals, right? It's always fun to sit here after a 2 out of 3 against the Redbirds and celebrate that. But I'm trying to keep everything into perspective. And I know that there'll be plenty of people who disagree with that. I know but that's just the way I look at this ball club right now. If you get nothing, you're almost kind of doing yourself a disservice if you let him walk for nothing at all, right? And that's kind of a problem if they can't find a common ground financially for a catcher who is going to be in his 30s and has caught a lot of innings. Then we need to trust the fact that they are in the front office and paid to do this for a reason. And I would hate if they go through the whole season and then they just let them walk and nothing gets returned on it, because as great as the system is, it needs higher level talent that's closer to the major league level if you're going to cut years off of this rebuild, because that's what it is. It's a rebuild.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack is in our comments here, just good thought after good thought that I'm going to kind of intertwine into my response to you, Juice. That way we can give credit to some of these good points because, like you said, it is always nice to take 2 or 3 from the Redbirds. And, Jack goes on to say this weekend and last weekend shows this team should be closer to 500. I think if they're healthy and I think if guys were performing to the potential that they should be, yeah, absolutely. I think if a guy like Nico Horner came around a little sooner this year, and I don't think that was anything more than just he got slowed by injury, and we've seen it time and time again. But I absolutely think that this team could be better. But again, where our shift is, like you said, Juice, after this kind of weekend is the trade deadline. It's quickly approaching. It's going to be here before we all know it. I completely agree that, my fly the W pick, Mr. Ortega, teams, I think, would want a guy like that. I agree. Good pinch hitter off the bench, can play all defense. 3. Yeah, could play all 3 outfield spots. He is a veteran. He's not a young guy that you have to worry is, overwhelmed by the stage. He's been around. He's gone through a lot of adversity in his MLB career. So I absolutely think that a lot of these guys are going to provide value at the deadline because, there is so much, pardon me, to move if they really want to. And I think that's kind of where some of this starts to transition here in my personal thoughts, because Jack goes on to say that he sees what you're saying about Willie, right? If the Cubs were to trade him, and if they trade him and Happ, how are they competing next year? Oh, they're not. That's plain and simple.
They're not. But I don't think that Ian Happ's going anywhere. I don't. I don't think so either. Extended, it's Ian Happ.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
Willie is the one that they're going to look long and hard at.
Yeah. Well, and I think. Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, Juice, and that's where like you said, I think Wilson, just because of the season he's having, that creates value. He's going to be probably the starting all-star catcher for the NL, unless there's a crazy change. That's probably going to be the case. But he is 30 years old. He is on his last year of his contract. There is no more team control. You are paying for an aging catcher. I think it almost hurt Willie that he came up so late in his development, right? He didn't come up till he was 26 years old. And I think, truthfully, if he comes up at 23, 24, and he's only 27, 28 right now, yeah, he's probably getting paid by the Cubs for 5-6 years, with the Cubs knowing that probably those last 2 years, you're not getting the same player that you are for the first 4. I think because of his age, I think because of the need, like you said, for more MLB ready prospects. There might be a team out there that's willing to buy. And to your point, Juice, you mentioned some of these fake buyers right at the deadline. I think there are going to be a couple of fake buyers, but I think there's going to be a lot of teams that wouldn't normally be in the dance or wouldn't be normally close to the dance if they didn't believe if they believe they have a roster and they're just not playing well and they need to address a couple areas. I think you see some teams really go hard and buy, and I think if nothing else, the expanded playoff format, you create the demand for a player at the deadline to be greater because there's more teams ultimately involved in the conversation, right? Like every year we look across the league, and usually by the deadline on each side, it's usually 6 teams that you're kind of confident of, like, okay, those are the 6 competing for the 5 playoff spots, right? Like that's pretty well known. There's sometimes maybe 7 that you could argue they're on each side. This year, you might have 8, 9, maybe even 10, probably more in like an AL than NL with the 10. But you're going to have a lot more teams that all of a sudden are like, we got a chance. Like maybe they were really banged up early in the season. They lost a lot of games because of that. Maybe they're just hitting their stride late. I look at Atlanta of last season. I think that's a perfect example of a team just hitting their stride late and getting hot at the right time. And that's exactly what rolled them to the World Series. I think Wilson this year, because of the expanded playoff format, brings back more than he might have in past years, just because I think it's just supply and demand. There's going to be teams that would love a power hitting catcher in the playoffs that has an absolute cannon arm and calls a pretty good game, that are going to sit there and go, man, what if he's the last piece? And maybe it's a team that's got a good catcher that you can rotate him with, and you have a DH then. Like, I just think to the point, I don't think Happ is going anywhere because he's 27. He kind of fits the mold of baseball now, right? Where he's a heavy contact and OBP guy. Like that's what the Cubs want. Like I think he fits the ideologies more of this new front office than Willie is. So that's where I think that is going. But Juice, yeah, man. I mean, this team is so interesting because it's really going to dictate. I think another good deadline for Jed and company could potentially make this team at least interesting to watch next year. Do I say they're competitive? Maybe not, but maybe they're that team that falls 3-4 games short of the postseason, or maybe they sneak in like to the last spot, just depending on some of these prospects that are coming along and what they do at the deadline this season.
And to add to your point about fake buyers and everything being close, I mean, I just looked at the standings. There are 4 divisions that are less than 4.5 game leads. I mean, there's a lot of tight races right now. And there's a lot of teams that are at the top of these who haven't sniffed the playoffs in a while either. Teams that have fan bases that are tired, right? I mean, I look at that whole AL Central and look at the status of that and what the way the White Sox have played. That AL Central could absolutely, and I'm not going to say that they trade for Wilson Contreras because they do have Grandal, but with that said, the Central could absolutely get in a bidding war with the Cubs for Wilson. That's an at bat, and that's a bat that I'm sure Minnesota would love to see. That would probably be on the cheaper side, and we know that Carter Hawkins has that relationship with the Guardians front office as well, considering he came from there. So I look at like the new expanded playoff, and if you're not going to make the playoffs, you might as well draw up a bidding war on your assets. And Wilson Contreras arguably could be the best hitter that is 100% available at the deadline. Let's face it, there's a lot of teams that are going to have to make a decision, much like I forget what team did it last year, but there was a team that was close to 500 and sold because they were like, we're fake contenders. They were close to 6.5 games, but they knew that they had outperformed in the beginning of the front run. So they went and they sold. I forgot what team it was. It might come to me eventually, but there'll be a team like that this year that sells because of the fact that they just don't believe in the roster that they have. There's very few times, and I know that we've talked about this, that the Cubs should spend. So I truly believe that there's going to be less of this in the future, considering that I think that they're going to be towards the top and in on all top free agents, probably from next year on. So this is a time where I think that the timeline just fits for the Cubs to sell. And like I said, I think that there are going to be very few times for the next spread of years, until we can figure out who this core is, that they're truly going to be sellers. Like, I think it's safe to kind of say that there's a good chance that this is the last year that they sell, because you can feel the franchise and the fan base getting tired of watching this already. And Ricketts for sure knows that as this goes deeper and deeper, there's more uprising from the fan base. So I truly think that, and you've heard it, right? I mean, they've went on several radio shows to confirm that we do have money to spend and we will spend it, but we just want to spend it within our window, and that's the next kind of step. So to say that, there's a good chance that this is the last time they get to do this, that's my hope. My hope is that this is it. Get a couple of these teams in a bidding war, bring back two, prime prospects, guys like Brendan Davis that are close, and that's the next move, right? You have your outfield set if Brendan Davis is here and Suzuki is in right and Ian Happ is here as well. And then anything after that for PCA down the line or Casey or Alcantara, like that's the next after this, right? If I can't re-sign Suzuki or he fails, then I have one of those guys to play right field. And then you're going to sprinkle in some infield help and pray to God that guys like Killian figure it out. So I do think that while it sucks to be in this position, it is what it is. And this is exactly what I think Jed kind of sees for the future, an idea of, hey, if you're just a little bit more patient with me, we'll find time to bring in big names. If they don't go out and spend huge again next year, which they spent some this offseason, it wasn't to the level that we thought it would in bringing back a Correa. But if they whiff this next offseason, then every Cub fan should be upset and revolting, because I truly do think that now that the ball club has punted on this year, you might as well, go out and spend tons and tons of money next year and bring in, some of these frontline guys. I know there's been talk about Turner and Bogarts and Correa. Add one of those guys plus maybe a front of the line starter. And like you said, Ron, this team doesn't look half bad after that.
Yeah. They're at least interesting in 2023 to watch. And once again, going to incorporate. And by the way, thanks, Jack, for being so active in the comments tonight. It's actually been helping drive some of the conversation. Sure. I know one interesting question he had, I kind of want to leave as maybe a little like kind of a spicy meatball in between the preview of our next game. So I'll hold on to that one. But he goes on to say he agreed that Cleveland was a good name drop for a guy like Wilson Contreras. He calls them World Series sleepers. I think that's certainly interesting. But they have played a lot of good ball this year. So
dude, they just play so much better than the talent that's on their roster, don't they? It's very like Tampa-esque. Right?
Yeah.
Like, who the hell is this guy? And then
it's Jose Ramirez and the Brady bunch. You know what I mean? Like that's what it kind of feels like. But that's okay because they somehow magically make it work. But they also had a lot of these guys come out of nowhere this year, as I think a lot of them are prospects that have come up. But guys like Quan, guys like Miller, who's a guy I happily have on my fantasy team. Like there's been some guys that kind of came out of nowhere that got really hot early and have just stayed consistent enough for that team to be competitive. But also on the point of Contreras here real quick from Jack, he says, how hard is it for a catcher to go to a new team in the middle of the season, really get to know the pitching staff? Could that hurt his trade value? It's definitely hard. There would be a lot of that, Sure. I think a team that goes after a guy like Contreras has their number one catcher comfortably there to call games. With the DH in both leagues now, that's where he brings the value. Because like you said, Juice, he might just be the best bat available, not even just the best catcher available. He could end up being the best bat available depending on how these standings continue to shake out. So it's certainly going to be something I think that they you never know, right? And I'm going to go ahead and flip an interesting point here, because you mentioned some of these teams, right, that could buy. Historically, they're not a team that buys a ton at the deadline. But if I'm the Cubs and I'm dead sold on trading Wilson Contreras, I'm taking him down to Tampa and looking at them and saying, hey, you guys are in the thick of it. You got to catch the Yankees, though. You're right there with Boston. You're right there with Toronto, but you need to go catch the New York Yankees. How about we give you a power bat like a Wilson Contreras? And rather than try to find that next Wander Franco that they might be popping out from their farm, why don't you go to the team and go for a guy that you might not see much of until, midway through 2023? But why not go out and get Tyler Glasnow?
Yeah, and this is something we've talked about even last offseason.
Yes, absolutely.
We pretty much said at the time when they had gotten Stroman, I think we had talked about flipping prospects from the Cubs system to go get Glasnow.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting idea, but the only problem with that is you have the medical records clearly, but I would fear so much that if you did that he would get him here and he would be worse off than you thought, right? Like that's
Well, I think,
I know every pitcher has had Tommy John now. Like that's just how this all works. But you clearly would have to do a lot more homework, than you would if you're flipping them for prospects. I do love the idea, though. I really do. I think that's a guy that fits the future, fits the mold, fits the timeline, and it's so hard to find a guy like him out there that can step in right away and contribute.
Add on to the fact that he's a frontline starter, so you get one of those right out of the way. He's still very young. I don't know his exact age off the top of my head, but I think he's only 26, 27, I want to say. Juice is doing a fact check for me. Appreciate that, sir. But again, he brings what you kind of want for the Cubs. And guess what? You also have first dibs at him on a contract extension to keep him. You don't have to go bid against a bunch of teams on the market if you want to really keep him. You get the first seat at the table with that as well. And I think the one interesting thing to keep in mind, too, with a guy like Glasnow is, in a trade, right? There's been trades that have been declined because of health records not showing positively or what have you. So I think the league would, in order for it to go through, the Cubs would have to be okay with the medical. Maybe they don't show every little detail, but it's, hey, this is the brunt honest truth of where he's at, what's going on. And again, you exchange other prospects too in that trade and make it a little interesting and you season it up a little bit. But that would essentially be the headline, in my head, of a move that benefits the Cubs, not this year because Glasnow's not going to pitch the rest of the season now. But you get first dibs at working with him. Could you imagine a guy like Tyler Glasnow in the pitch lab?
Yeah, that'd be scary. He'll be, like, I just looked it up for you. I wanted to make sure he'll be 29 in August 23rd. August 23rd. A little
older than I thought.
But then again, we know this, the average prime for a starting pitcher is the 30s. I mean, let's face it. There are guys who can pitch well until they're 37.
Max Scherzer.
And be effective. So I don't think that's a 29 is not, an age that would, make me back off about him. But with that said, like you would absolutely have to do a lot of homework to bring in a guy like that, see the medical records, see where he's at, talk to him. How is he feeling? How's he progressing through his rehab? That's the only problem with that, Ron, is that becomes more of a, man, you set yourself back a long way. If you trade a piece like Willie and then you get him in here and he can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
And that's the only, it's very curious and it's a fun conversation. It's one that I wish, like, truth serum to Jed Hoyer and Carter, and just ask him, I wouldn't even ask him about him. I'd go, what's your philosophy on buying starting pitching? And that's because that's realistically what they're doing. Marcus Stroman was on a pretty team-friendly deal, all things considered. Tyler Glass now, with that type of, resume and the stuff, I would imagine he'd be pulling back a huge contract that they would absolutely have to be, comfortable with paying for the future. So I want to know, I really truly want to know what their philosophy is on buying pitching, because it just has kind of seemed like they've very much tried to be the organization this year that's talked a lot about the developmental side for pitching. So it'll be interesting. And it's not to say that like the idea of, player development stops after, when they make it to the major league level, you bring a guy like that in, they're always trying to get better.
Right.
It's just interesting. I think that's a good idea. I like where your head's at on that. I would go that route if I get trade offers and nobody's giving me a blue chip like prospect for Willie. I would go, okay, well, now I'm going to pivot on this, and I might as well take a bigger swing, because most of the guys that are B status are going to, a lot of them fail. So that's the question that you would have to have. What's on the table? What's available? What can you bring back? And what is more of a home run or bust move look like when you aren't, demanding the room and able to bring back that blue chip kind of piece. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's a fun one. And just quickly too, to preface, right? Like, I think it's interesting, right, what you said about the buying starting pitching, because I read an article and I don't recall from where, but this sticks out in my brain. Is that like, actually, sorry, pardon me. It was our boy Tyler from Tab Sportsnet. He wrote about it. It was a news piece, but a lot of really interesting kind of quotes that it was right when Jed had the kind of came out about the old core. It was that interview that really kind of shook up the Cubs news world for like 7 hours. But like, no, but it was a memorable
I get what you're
story,
saying.
right? But he mentioned, right, where they bought, like he said, he was like, we bought so much starting pitching, and that's something I wish we didn't do as much of. I think when they say they're wanting to spend, they're going to spend, but they're going to spend wisely. And I think that they're going to spend smartly. I don't think they're just going to go out and get the biggest name free agent pitcher that they can get for Tyler Chatwood money because they need a guy. I think they're going out and saying, hey, we're developing a good guy here, a good guy here, a good guy here. We don't really have as much here, or it's further down the line of, the players that we're confident in. We're going to go spend a little bit of money there. I think that's what you're going to start to see more of. And they might be like the highest bidder on a player in that instance. And when that's the case, you are spending money. You're just doing it. It's more targeted. It's more, I'm not just going to go out and it's not best player available draft strategy type shit, right? It's, hey, I am very selective with where I spend because I have this coming. That's what they're trying to develop. Yeah. Again, we talk about it here. They're trying to go after the model of the Dodgers. And yes, they might not spend the dumb money that LA does, at least not under the Ricketts ownership, in my opinion, but they're just going to do it intelligently when they do spend. I think a team like historically, like the San Francisco Giants has been very much like that. Like they'll add a big name, but it's a focused big name of where they add him and what he's filling a need. And that's why they were so competitive for all those years and still continue to be competitive. Maybe that's the model that they're trying to take there.
Cleveland. Cleveland, same way.
Yeah,
that's kind of the same kind of model.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just, I agree with that point. I think, I think it's almost a waiting game at this point between, who blinks first, who pulls the trigger, and it's between the fan base and ownership. That's as you look from the outside, it's like, how much longer can we scream and yell? We can't take this anymore before they spend stupidly, right? Yeah. Like, and that's I hope that there's not conflicting, strategies within the front office. Like, man, like Ricketts coming down and going, yo, guys, I need something now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up in a contract like Jason Hayward, and that's bad.
Yep.
That's bad baseball. That's bad front office ability. I wanted to ask you this question because this is kind of ties back into, do you think we talked about it a lot last year and none of it happened? None of them came back. Do you think it's an opportunity for the Cubs to trade Wilson Contreras and then bring him back?
Mm-hmm. Now you're opening up a rabbit hole that I don't
because think about it this way, and from what you just said sparked that interest to me. The Cubs don't have a lot of depth in the minor leagues at catcher.
Yeah.
The Cubs could be the ones who make Willie the best offer. They absolutely could. They're going to have a ton of money to spend. With the DH becoming a thing in the NL, it'll be pretty easy to give him a 5-year contract and just say, you're my everyday DH after this age. When I can finally bring up a catcher that is worth, maybe it's Pablo Aliendo, or maybe it's a guy that isn't even on the roster yet, or maybe it's the kid that they had signed internationally from overseas. I'm blanking on his name. The first Ukrainian player, something like that. But maybe that's the 3D kind of chess that Jed Hoyer plays here, because there was so much talk about trading Chris Bryant, bringing Chris Bryant back, that's something that maybe they've talked in-house of, if we truly want to be the highest bidder for one of the best hitters that's going to be on the market, we can absolutely bring Willie back. But this next, 3 months, give him a chance to make a run with Cleveland. Or I know Houston's been a name, but I'm souring on the fact that I think he's going to go to Houston. I don't think that the Astros are going to make a play on him, considering that they really, really like Maldonado to catch at that point. So
even though Maldonado's like almost 40.
He can't hit, but he's very good at catching.
He is. He's a very good defensive catcher.
And working with the pitchers. So you start to wonder, like, these are all options on the table. And if Willie truly wants to be here and they want to do good for Wilson, they could absolutely go that route, trade and then reach back out to him when it's all over and go, hey, I'm going to give you the Cub contract that you deserve.
That's a spicy take, Juice, that I appreciate on a Sunday night like that. That's a fun one to actually consider. Would this team finally, in a way, do right by it? But knowing that it's like, hey, we're gonna flip you real quick, go get some additional resources, and then you're coming back this offseason. Go try and win a World Series with a team that's truly contending. Who knows, right? An interesting proposal there, Juice, that I'm very intrigued by. But I will say, my friend, we have gone down a hell of a rabbit hole. Quickly to reel this thing back in, the Cubs still won a baseball game today, which helped win a series over the Cardinals. So, Juice, I do want to turn it back over to you quickly here. Any final thoughts here about the Cardinals series, about things that you've seen this weekend before we go ahead and look ahead to Tuesday's game against the Cincinnati Reds?
Yeah, the Cardinals suck. Always good to beat them 2 out of 3. Very excited for the great performances out of Nico Horner and a lot of the bullpen guys that were out there today. Way to keep fighting, and win a baseball game. So way to take 2 out of 3. And just a comment, I know I wasn't on the show on Friday, but Kyle Hendricks, man, great performance. And it was good to see some old Kyle. And for him to be very comfortable at the behind or in St. Louis and really shoving, it was nice to see it.
Absolutely, it was a gem, Juice. It was it made my heart warm on Friday night. I needed that, especially after that Pirates series, which was just completely miserable. But yeah, man, I'm right there with you. I think, again, this is great momentum. Just getting to the dog days of summer, maybe they make things interesting in a competitive run. And I'm not saying, they're going to go win it all. No, but maybe they win a couple games in a row. Maybe they start taking a couple series in a row. Maybe they climb the standings just a little bit to make things interesting, right? Or maybe, they don't do that, but then you really keep that focus on the deadline. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of good baseball coming up. This is a good way to get through the last weekend of June before the 4th of July holiday, which is quickly approaching. But Juice, we will go ahead and turn our attentions forward. Cubs win 6-5. Fuck the Cardinals. You know the drill. But the Cubs aren't back in action until Tuesday, so Monday will be an off day, which means it'll be an off day for us here at Cubs on Tap as well. That one surely will be enjoyed by the boys, I think, after this current series that we just recapped. But on Tuesday, it is a 7:05 first pitch time, Tuesday, June 28th at Wrigley Field here in Chicago, Illinois. Right now, if you are somehow listening in the Cincinnati market and you're going to listen to this game, WLW 700 on the radio, Bally Sports Ohio on the TV, and you know it. In Chicago, it's 670 The Score, WRTO 1200, and Marquee Sports Network to catch this one. Luis Castillo will go for the Reds, the lone notable name outside of Joey Votto that's still on that roster. He is 2-4 on the season, 3.71 ERA, and he will be dealing against Keegan Thompson for the Cubbies. Keegan just continuing to be a bright spot. He's 7-2 with a 3.1 ERA and 55 Ks on the year. Juice, I'm going to turn it back over to you, my friend. Thoughts on this upcoming Cincinnati game on Tuesday, and then before we totally wrap this thing up, we will get some Fly the W picks for Tuesday as well. But Juice, the floor is yours, my friend. Tuesday's game, what do you have for me?
Yeah, believe it or not, this is must-see television for me. Two guys going for the future. You're looking at Keegan Thompson and Justin Steele. It's two starts that I'm sure us as Cub fans will be sitting, watching, and seeing growth. That's exactly what this is about for the rest of the season here. So I truly, I'm ready to see the next group of Cubs core, start to establish themselves. And Keegan's done that. Justin's been a lot better as late his last start. A lot of shaky defense. Well, no more Vier on this roster as of right now. So hopefully feel the ball, pick it up, throw the first, and let's see Justin go 7 innings. Let's see him have a good start and build on it. And Keegan, just keep doing what you're doing. Continue to shove, continue to work your pitches in and gain confidence at this level. Because, man, it just feels so good when, like, a guy like that who you didn't expect to be much, right? Like, has been this important to your roster. And now we're almost looking at it as like, man, maybe we got something here. And we talked about it on the show before. They're going to go and find front of the line pitching, no matter if it's via trade or via free agency, or they developed it themselves. But if Keegan Thompson is at the bottom of this rotation and Justin Steele is, right above him in that or below Keegan, maybe you're 4 or 5, interchangeable, whatever, that's a pretty good start. And you got guys like Wicks down there and Caleb Killian, who struggled in his last two starts, but he's going to figure it out. You start to kind of piece together, the future, and you start to, see more sunshine than gray. And I think that these are, as bad as these two baseball teams are, it's still appointment television for me. I will be tuning in to watch each and every one of these and enjoying some new growth and some new narratives to the storyline for both of these guys' careers to start this series. And I hope I sold it as much as I can. And plus, it's coming off an off day. So we're really going to be, jonesing for some Cubs baseball because tomorrow is off. And I don't know how you feel, Ron, but like when they don't play, I miss it. If it's just 10 minutes that I sit and watch, if I'm not on the show, or if it's watching all 9 innings, when they don't play and I don't have that option, throw on the Marquee Sports Network and watch my Cubbies, it still becomes a sad day. And it's a double kick in the nuts because tomorrow is Monday.
It is. That is a good point. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to this series as well because I think that, like you said, I think Keegan and Justin are back in that. Hey, we're here watching this for the growth, and these guys have what it takes. So if they're able to build off of their last starts, or in Steele's case, kind of rebound a little bit, Joey and I touched on it pretty aggressively on our Thursday show that the numbers are 100% got to be taken in context, right? Like, yeah, he gave
Yep.
up all those runs, but like, if you watch the game, you're like, he still pitched pretty well. Like, he got hit around a little bit. And like you said, Jonathan Vieira's not here to ruin things like that anymore. So, it'll be interesting. It'll be a good series. Always looking forward though to seeing Keegan shove too. It always helps too when he's on your fantasy team, and then you got a little more like vested interest outside of just the Cubs fandom. But Juice, I do want to turn it quickly back over to you, my friend, here for this series. Who is your fly the W player for the Cubs against the Reds?
I'm going to stay with red hot Nico Horner. I think that's a good pick. I've loved his approach since coming back as well too. I think he's putting together a really good season, a season that I think with another offseason of putting on more muscle, his future starts to be more and more interesting of what kind of player he can be. We already know he's very versatile. We already know that he puts the bat on the ball. If he could start to work some power into his game, man, like we're looking at a really high-end all-star. And maybe that's a guy that you look at as a pillar for the growth future and this new core. Maybe he's a part of that. And I'm going to stick with Nico Horner. I've really loved the way he's played baseball this year when he's been healthy, and I truly think that he's on to something. Get in there, put some more weight on, have this approach, and you're going to see more balls fly out of the yard for him and more extra bases. But it's just all about making sure he hones in that approach.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think Nico's a great pick, and Jack agrees with you. Who's also going Nico here, but yeah, man. I mean, Nico is so interesting because I saw something that like they're like he can be like this type of player. I'm not saying he is this player, like a Trey Turner type though, where maybe the power is like 15 to 20 on the max terms of home runs, but high contact, he gets it done defensively. Like that's still a valuable player at the shortstop position in today's game. Not every shortstop has to be Carlos Correa, where he hits bombs and plays elite defense. Like you can be the contact guy at the position, but you can still be incredibly effective. So I like the Nico pick. I'm actually going to ride. So there's two dudes on the Cubs roster that absolutely historically just love seeing Luis Castillo. Ironically, they're two guys that people keep saying need to be here as a part of the future to be the veterans. And I'm going to take one of those two veterans. I'll leave the other one for Joey if he wants him. I think everybody can guess who it is based on my pick, because my pick is Ian Happ. He is batting .364 and 22 at-bats against Castillo with a home run and 5 ribbies. Those 5 ribbies actually the most among anybody on the team that has gone against Castillo on this Cubs roster, pardon me. So I'm going to ride Ian Happ. Man, he's just been good. He had a bad day today on Sunday, but I mean, he's just putting together. Again, Ian Happ's an all-star, man. Give Ian Happ the gold glove today, too, with that catch. Ian Happ is my fly the W pick. I'm going to keep the heat going because I took Ortega, and that looked mighty nice this weekend against the Cardinals. So I'm going to roll some of that good juju into my pick here with Ian Happ. So we'll leave the other one for Joey, though, and I think everybody who knows who it is. Whew. Damn, Juice. We haven't done a nice long Sunday Fun Day show in quite some time, my friend. But unfortunately, all good things do come to an end. And before we get out of here, I do want to remind everybody, Juice, that Cubs on Tap is the official Cubs podcast of the On Tap Sports Network. Check out all of our great work over at ontapsportsnet.com and at ontapsportsnet on social media. You can follow the pod-specific account here for us at Cubs on Tap. We are at Cubbies on Tap. That's Cubbies. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me on the Bluebird app. I am at Luce on Tap. Juice is at Juice on Tap. Be sure to follow all the other great contributors here. Our friend Joey Ricotta at Joey Knows Nothing. Also, great contributors in Brandon M. Kane and Teddy Freddy 270 on Twitter. Our boys Brandon and Tyler. Be sure to follow all of us. Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks. You know the drill, folks. And yes, we all have friends that like the Southsiders. Sox on Tap guys do a damn good job covering them as well. OnTapSportsNet.com, at OnTapSportsNet on social media, DownTap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Juice, it is always a pleasure, my friend, not only to do a Sunday Fun Day show with you, but to talk about a Cubs victory, and a Cubs series victory nonetheless, over none other than the fucking Cardinals. That is some good Sunday juju rolling into a Monday off day, my friend. But what do you say? We get out of here the only way we know how, at Cubs on Tap.
Fuck the Cardinals.
And let's go Cubbies.